Hey guys, today we're talking about rate of perceived exertion. This is a training style or methodology that we can use in powerlifting or in any style of training. Most of you, if you're experienced in any type of training, have probably used a percentage-based style of training. There's nothing wrong with a percentage-based style of training, especially when you're new. It kind of gives people a target to hit. The other thing with being new is that you tend to make very large jumps as you progress, but that disappears quite quickly, and especially as you get older. A lot of your environment impacts your training. This includes your sleep, your nutrition, how hydrated you are, your stress levels from family, work, school, whatever, mental health. All those kind of things influence the intensity or how you feel during a workout. Which can lead to often missing a lift, right? So you go in, you look at your program, you see you got to hit a certain number on squats, and because you didn't sleep or you had a stressful week or whatever, you missed those squats, and then that can negatively impact the rest of your training session, and it's also defeating, right? So that's why we tend to shift towards RPE based training style, or even a reps and reserve training style. RPE is a way of measuring your reps in reserve. And what that means is like you're training to a feeling of perceived effort where you feel like you have a certain number of reps left in the tank, right? So you get to a certain number and stop, but you know that if it was life or death, you could hit a certain number more repetitions. So that's what the reps in reserve mean, and that's why we like to use a rate of perceived exertion. The thing about perceived exertion is that it's self-perceived, so it's you yourself perceiving how you feel and not being dictated by somebody else. So you don't take a video of it, show someone and say, how hard do you think this is? It's how hard in that moment did you feel it was on that sliding scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is the easiest thing you ever did in the world and 10 is the absolute hardest thing you ever did in the world, with a gun to your head, life or death kind of scenario. And you can see different scales of RPE. You can Google a chart. I think there might be one in the app as well for you to see. But the actual chart itself matters less than why we use RPE. Studies on strength training, specifically power sports like weightlifting and powerlifting, have shown that day to day we tend to fluctuate 10 to 15% in terms of what our max effort can feel like or can be. So what that means is if you have a 200-pound back squat, it can fluctuate plus or minus 10-15%. That's 20 to 30 pounds on any given day, just based on how you feel, right? And the things that influence that are you well rested? Have you eaten? If you haven't eaten, RPE goes up, right? If you haven't slept, RPE goes up. If you're stressed, RPE goes up. If you're annoyed, if there's too much stimulus around, right? If you can't focus, if there's somebody bothering you, all those things make things seem harder, which increases that rate of perceived exertion. So there's ways to reduce RPE as well, right? So we use things like caffeine. So if we dose caffeine at a certain dosage, 3-6 milligrams per kilogram, we get a substantial decrease in rate of perceived exertion, which is why caffeine is such a potent drug that we use in powerlifting, in order to decrease rate of perceived exertion and lift more weight. So again, when you go into a training session with a number in mind versus a feeling in mind, it's easy to get to that feeling. It might take months of some very educated guessing to figure out what your RPE scale actually is, but once you kind of narrow it down, chasing that feeling of a 7 or a 7.5 or an 8 or an 8.5 is easy to figure out, and when you get there, you're never going to fail. You can't fail if you were given an RPE 7, but you can definitely fail if you were given a set of 200 for 3, right? And if your RPE is too high that day because of stress or malnutrition or dehydration or low sodium, like there's so many variables that influence effort, that it's very important that we don't fixate on a number. And what I see in beginners as well is people will use RPE, but then they'll have numbers in the back of their head, right? It's like, well, I have to hit this much. Or they'll look at last week and go, last week I did this, so this week I have to do 2.5 more. and that's not how RPE works. You have to chase the number that's programmed, because your body doesn't know the pounds or the kilos. It knows whether or not it worked hard enough to get an adaptation, to change, to get better and to grow. So our goal is to constantly have good workouts where we're hitting those RPEs so that we can progress, we can feed our body, we can recover, and then we get the adaptation which we want, which is to get stronger over time. So that's the explanation of kind of why RPE training is so valuable. And knowing that day to day things will change, and that, for instance, like myself, if I have an almost 600-pound deadlift, it's not uncommon to have no sleep, go in, and not be able to hit 500 pounds, right? So if I was programmed a 520 squat or 520 deadlift for, 2 sets of 2, I'd go in and I'd fail, and I'd have a shitty workout. I'd get no benefit, no adaptation, because I didn't actually hit anything. And then I'd probably skip a few things and be pissed off, versus if I was given, 2 sets of 2 at RPE 8, that weight can be anything. It can be 520, it could be 540, it could be 490. But if I'm hitting those numbers, that's what matters over time to get the desired result, especially when you're peaking for a competition. There's good days and there's bad days, and I expect at least a third of your days to be bad, right? Especially the older you get and the more responsibility you take on and the more other things influence your training. And that's why it's good to judge effort instead of judge just the weight. Your progress is based on how many good workouts can you get in, and can you complete the whole workout, not miss any lifts, and get that adaptation. So that over time, months and months and years, you get the adaptation which you want, which is to ultimately get stronger. So I hope that explanation makes sense, and let me know if you have any questions.